That's right. You're listening to another episode of the co-main event Mixed Martial Arts Podcast. I'm Chad Dundas. That's Ben Folks. We're both longtime MMA journalists, and for the last 12 years, we've been meeting here every week to break down all the action in the wild, weird, and occasionally wonderful world of mixed martial arts. Before we get started this week, just one last reminder that we are in the final week of our 50% off sale over on Patreon right now. If you are not currently a paying member of the CME's Patreon, you can get 50% off either on a monthly membership or on an annual membership. If you go over to the site and use the code 20E as in Echo 37, join up with the Co-Main Event Podcast Patreon. But you got to act now. This thing ends on December 15th. If you want to try out the Patreon page or you want to get back in, if you were a member before who wandered away, this is a great time to check it out, come back to the fold, but you got to do it sometime this week. You got to do it before December 15th. Go to patreon.com/co-main event, sign up and use the code 20E37. Well, Ben, we had UFC 310 over the weekend. I'm sorry. Did you have something to say about the Patreon?
I did, in fact, Chad, because I was observing this discourse recently on Blue Sky, where people are talking about migrating to Blue Sky from Twitter. And people, I noticed, a couple of people were like, hey, there's not enough MMA people on Blue Sky talking fights and whatnot yet to make like the fight night experience fun. But also, there are enough people on Twitter talking it, but they are assholes, B. Too many of them are just assholes, ruining the experience. What to do? And I thought to myself, you know what you could do? You could join the CME Patreon that would then give you access to the CME Discord where they're talking all kinds of shit on fight night every other time about all kinds of stuff. And you know what? Zero assholes. Just something to think about.
We don't allow assholes over in the Discord. They are talking fights and other stuff pretty much 24/7, 365 over there. If you want to get in, you can do it for 50% off, as I've been saying. 20E37 before December 15th. We'll get you involved at that 50% off discount. Now we can talk UFC 310. That occurred over the weekend down there at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Alexander Pantoja defeats the debuting Kai Asakura via second round technical submission to retain the men's flyweight title. And in the co-main, Shavkat Rakhmonov defeats Ian Gary via unanimous decision in their welterweight contest. We will talk about both of those fights, plus lots more coming up on this show. We got some listener mail. We got all kinds of stuff happening. Ben, I'm going to let you do Choose Your Own Adventure.
Okay, I love Choose Your Own Adventure. Some of my favorite times in my childhood are reading Choose Your Own Adventure books.
Well, I'm here to provide a similar experience for you this week. What do you want to talk about first? Do you want to talk about Pantoja and Asakura, or do you want to talk about Rakhmonov and Ian Gary? Because obviously you had the title fight at the top of the card, but there was a lot of sentiment, I guess, floating around last week that maybe that boy good, Shavkat Rakhmonov and Ian Machado Gary were the actual people's main event. So where do you want to go, bud? What do you want to do?
Let's start off with Shavkat That Boy Good and Ian Machado Gary, because I'm of a couple different minds on this fight. For one thing, I'll say this right up front. Not what I expected.
I don't think it was what anybody expected, right?
Not what I expected in a few different ways. I thought Shavkat would have an easier time handling him. I did not think we were going to go to full 5 rounds. I did not think Ian Gary would do as well as he did. I also thought that Shavkat would just do a little more than he did. Yeah. Now, there's been some talk afterwards that he went into this fight with an injury, which, if true, then you do have to step back a little bit and respect the big brass ones on your boy Shavkat, who already had a title shot. He was already supposed to fight the champ, Bilal Muhammad. And then Bilal Muhammad gets that bone infection. I say again, gross. He gets the opportunity to say, hey, do you want to stay on this fight card? We'd like to have you fight Ian Gary. Nothing really new to gain for him. by beating Ian Gary, especially if he's dealing with an injury, to go in there hurt against Ian Gary. If you'd lost to Ian Gary, if Ian Gary had managed to finish that choke, which seemed dangerously close at one point, nobody would have wanted to hear shit about Shavkat's injury. There would have been no sympathy for him. His title shot would have disappeared in a puff of smoke. And to go out there, put it on the line anyway, come away with a win, you got to respect that. I also, though, think that if I'm Bilal Muhammad, I feel a little better about fighting Shavkat now, defending my title against that guy. He doesn't seem quite so scary after that fight. And also, I got to say, if you're Ian Gary, we were saying beforehand that this was a good move for Ian Gary to go from supposed to fight Joaquin Buckley like a week later. You take this fight instead. Tougher fight, but a way more high-profile fight, and he did better than any of us expected. I don't think he really suffers any drop at all, even though it's the first professional loss on his record. I still think he comes out of this with people going, all right, Ian Gary's not bad. Ian Gary hung tough there with Shavkat. That ain't nothing. It's more, honestly, I think you maybe get more from a close loss to Shavkat than you would from a close win over Joaquin Buckley on a fight night event,
Absolutely. I think this is the very rare occurrence where maybe the losing fighter improved his stock and the winning fighter either had a push or maybe his stock declined a little bit, because we had talked about this, as you said, before this fight. Ian Gary and Shavkat Rakhmonov had fought almost mirror images of each other in terms of like the competition that they had faced leading up to their fight. They had fought almost the same guys for the most part. And coming into this fight, Rakhmonov was a big favorite. You talked last week on the Patreon page that he was riding around with guns the size of a little bow wow.
That's right.
And how was Ian Machado Gary going to stop Shavkat Rakhmonov from doing Shavkat Rakhmonov shit? There wasn't a ton of Shavkat Rakhmonov shit in this fight. And in fact, if anything, I think we were all impressed with Ian Gary's ability to control the distance on the feet. Like we said, he had to win this, to stay off the ground, to show off good takedown defense. And, in the later rounds there to almost finish that choke. The interesting thing is the first several rounds of this thing, not a lot of action. This was not a great fight. Let's say that right up front, just in terms of like how fun it was to watch. Those early rounds were essentially decided by one or two strikes, because there just wasn't that much going on. If Ian Gary had landed a couple of solid punches in those first few rounds, we might well be talking about him as the winner here this Tuesday afternoon. Of course, it does go Shavkat Rakhmonov's way, but in a way that I think you're right. I think he seems less scary now, and I think that if I was Bilal Muhammad, I would be, I don't know if breathing a sigh of relief is the right way to put it, because we all think, Bilal probably really and truly believes that he would wipe the mat with Shavkat Rakhmonov no matter what. He is the champion after all. But it seems like a less insurmountable task, I guess, to take on Shavkat Rakhmonov. And, maybe he had, torn MCL, I think is what some people are saying, a torn knee ligament. I guess, but
you know what I mean, if that's true, if you have a torn ligament in your knee,
you know what I always say, if you're going to go out there and fight, like, don't tell me you were injured after the fact when you lose. It only looks good if you tell me you were injured if you win. Then you can be like, oh, I came into this fight with an MCL. Okay, fair enough. But like, did he really win in terms of public perception?
I mean, yes. But also I don't know if he's out there talking about it too much. I heard it from Daniel Cormier, basically. So it's not like he got on the mic afterwards and was just like, my MCL is totally gone, you guys. Also, though, speaking of getting on the mic afterwards, we talk about Bilal Muhammad? Because first of all, bro, you had to know that this was a likely situation, right? That Shavkat's probably going to win, and when he does, it was very possible that you guys would do the in-cage face-off. And it was like the most awkward in-cage face-off ever, because first of all, Shavkat has to ask him to come up. Then we got to wait for Bilal Muhammad to make his way to the cage. Joe Rogan cracks an aside about how security doesn't know who he is. They got to let Bilal Muhammad in here. Somebody vouch for Bilal Muhammad. Tell him he's the champion and that they should let him through. And first of all, I saw people noting on social media at the time. They're like, "Oh, LOL, Joe Rogan got jokes," and it was like, "Well, he is supposed to be a comedian. Like that was supposed to be his whole shit, like kind of to begin with." Anyway, Bilal Muhammad then eventually gets in there. We get this. I'm gonna go ahead and say iconic of a attempted three-way handshake between Bilal Muhammad, Joe Rogan, and Shavkat Rachmanov, where everybody is trying to shake hands with somebody else. It's so perfect. I mean, watch everybody.
Like a Quentin Tarantino movie where everybody's pointing a gun at somebody else.
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly. And also the whole time I'm looking at it, Bilal Muhammad, I was like, so you went to watch a pay-per-view where you knew at some point the cameras would be on you. You knew you'd probably have some kind of in-cage face-off, and we decided to go hoodie for that. You're the champion. Get a little Ric Flair drip going when you're the champion, Chad. Show us something, man. Get a little Ilya Taporia action. You know, the Leech went and got himself a tailored suit for that press conference and then was very disappointed when nobody got to see it. Bilal Muhammad is the champion, going to roll in here for the post-fight face-off with his next challenger, and looks like he is just making a quick run to the grocery store early in the morning and figures, I'll probably won't run into anybody I know. It's fine. I'll just go like this. What the hell, man?
I mean, especially for a guy who you could argue needs to up his public appearance, his public image a little bit.
Yeah,
how
get a little star power going.
Yeah, maybe that's just not him though, man. Maybe he's, you don't want to be putting on airs, right? If you're Bilal Muhammad, you got to be you. You think you should be putting on airs?
You're the fucking champ. With George St. Pierre, can you imagine George St. Pierre rolling up in there looking like he is picking his kid up from soccer practice in fucking hoodie, t-shirt? Come on. Never in your life. Look
if
the
George
part,
St.
be
Pierre,
the part, motherfucker.
If George St. Pierre even owns a hoodie, it's Louis Vuitton.
Yeah.
I guarantee. Some kind of designer shit. It was awkward during this fight that they kept calling it like a title eliminator, saying the winner was going to get a title shot when one of the guys already did have a title shot. So as you said, it was I guess a ballsy move for Shavkat Rachmanov to show up and fight Ian Gary, almost with nothing on the line. Nothing to gain, only stuff to lose. Do you think that I have to stop saying Machado in a funny voice about Ian Gary now that he's over there having his corner in Portuguese?
Okay. That was one thing that surprises me a little bit, because I mean, obviously he has no problem with it. He's picking up everything they're putting down. But it's also like, I guess I could see it if you're fighting another native English speaker and you're like, well, here's a way that we can talk and he won't know what we're saying. I think that's less of a concern with Shavkat. I mean, definitely he understands some English, but it's also like we're over there. That's not even when they're shouting instructions mid-fight. They were doing that in the corner when it's just you guys and you don't have to worry really about Shavkat hearing you. I mean, if anything, I guess I'm impressed with Ian Gary's command of the language, if he can do that.
Yeah, it didn't seem like they were doing it for a strategic thing.
No.
It seemed like maybe that's just how they conversate. You know what I mean?
Which, that's impressive, if that's the case, man. I mean, in answer to your question, you can still keep saying Machado in a funny voice. It's too good. It's too long running a piece of the lore at this point.
I did want to mix in this question we got from our guy Balls Deep,
naturally,
which as ever is spelled BAWLZDEEP, one word. He says, as an Ian Gary hater, I'm surprised at how well he did against Rachmanov. After seeing this fight, I also give Bilal Muhammad a much better chance when he fights Rachmanov. Also, did Gary have to change his shorts because his balls was too hot? I think so. This was some history in the making. We've never seen, as far as I know, a guy have to change his fight shorts in the middle of a fight because the cage ripped a giant hole in his ass. The not necessarily in his ass, but the part of his shorts that covered.
Yeah, the
Okay.
seat.
The seat of his pants. There you go.
Honestly, when it happened and when they were talking about like, oh, I've never seen that before, I was like, I'm kind of surprised we never have. Maybe it's a testament to the high quality goods that we're wearing in there in the cage, because
you think so? Because it seemed to me like more of maybe a knock on the UFC outfitting policy.
The fact that it hasn't happened before.
The fact that it happens at all. That's literally the only thing these shorts are used for.
Yeah, but you get in there and be doing some grappling, any kind of the whatever the best quality board shorts, grappling shorts you think you got, you're gonna rip some every now and then. That's just kind of how it's gonna go. And especially in the fury of battle, I could see how it would happen. But the now that we know that it can happen, now everybody got to be out there. What's your second pair of shorts? What's your backup shorts option? What are you bringing with you?
For me, whatever my backup shorts are, I got a knife in there. That's how I'm getting my knife. That's how I'm getting my knife in the cage. They can pat me down, run me with the metal detector before I get in the cage, thinking I'm clean. Then I go in there, big piece of my shorts rips off. I got to put on my extra shorts. Next thing you know, I'm pulling out a knife.
See,
even in the odds.
I would just have it so that my second pair of shorts is way shorter. Like just kind of disturbingly and impossibly to ignore shorter. Like mine, I go in there first, normal length of board shorts. I'm like, oh shit, they ripped. I got to go to the backup pair. And I'm like Dennis Holman Speedo shit. And I'm just acting like nothing happened. And I'm just
You're going to be like, the only other pair I brought is these cut off jeans. Sorry, that's what I got to go with now.
Yeah, hey, not my fault. I'm cutting them off so high that you can see the pockets. You can see the pockets hanging down on my thighs. That's the kind of shit I'm talking. Like the kind of shit that, your mom wore to a Warrant concert when, she left you with your uncle that time and went to the county fair. You know the kind I'm talking about.
My mom has no idea who Warrant is.
Cherry Pie. That was a big hit.
You could win the fight. You could put your mouthpiece in that pocket. Man, that's functionality right there. What do you do with Ian Gary now? Obviously, with Shavkat Rakhmonov, he's going to fight Bilal Muhammad for the title. Ian Gary, they probably have not updated these UFC rankings. He was number 7 before this fight. He went toe-to-toe with number 3. Now what do you do with the guy?
I don't know, man. I think that you got some options, really, because it's like I honestly came away from this being like, I think a lot of people are going to take Ian Gary more seriously now than they did before.
For sure.
Just because we've never seen anybody else give Shavkat that good a fight. So,
and especially like there was a lot of people who just weren't trying to hear it from Ian Gary, right? There was a lot of naysayers, maybe because he just didn't seem that likable on a personal level to them. But this, I feel like, is a performance that is going to have a lot of people kind of eating crow in a way.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that you got some options out there. It's weird how the completely flying under the radar here is because Ian Gary pulls out of this fight, where you got Colby Covington coming up here this weekend, which made me go, oh yeah, shit. Colby Covington? Do you believe that? That guy's still around, Jen.
Yeah, we haven't thought about Colby Covington in a while, and frankly, you know what? It was refreshing.
Haven't thought about him at all. He steps in here and is going to fight Joaquin Buckley this weekend, and I don't know. That was sort of a weird reminder to me of like, yeah, we are sort of. It feels like closing the book on one era of welterweight, and maybe done closed that book on one era of welterweight and has moved on to something new. Because remember for a while there where it was just sort of like Kamaru Usman, Colby Covington at the top, guys like Leon Edwards kind of trying to break in. And then it feels like you blinked your eyes and you got Bilal Muhammad Shavkat, Rachmanov, and maybe Ian Gary knocking on the door.
Yeah, and like we said, Ian Gary was scheduled to fight Joaquin Buckley originally, and so if Joaquin Buckley beats Colby Covington, does that matchup still make sense? Because I honestly, I kind of feel like Ian Gary might have moved beyond that with this performance against Shavkat Rachmanov. Although, that said, I don't exactly know who you would match him up with. Maybe Kamaru Usman. They were going back and forth. Ian Gary accused him of ducking their fight, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know, man. It seems like a little bit of a matchmaking quandary to me.
Just out of curiosity, I went real quick and looked up the betting odds on Saturday's Colby Covington Joaquin Buckley fight. Colby Covington, Chad, is a plus 230 underdog in this one.
Well, I look forward to watching him get his ass beat. All right, let's do, before we go on here to talk about the flyweight title fight, let's go ahead and, like we always do about this time, we'll do a little bit of listener mail.
Listener mail.
First piece of listener mail this week comes to us from Matthew Erickson over on Patreon. Maybe this will get us into a little bit of this Pantoja discussion. He says, my question is about Pantoja's call out of Demetrius Johnson. I usually hate things like this, but DJ retired recently, went out on top. I think at least a couple of rankings outside of the UFC had him ranked above Pantoja right up until his retirement, and I legitimately would want to watch this fight. Plus, the UFC never got to see Mighty Mouse with his black belt. We only got to ever see the brown belt version. I know DJ has already said no to this idea, and I respect that too, but am I crazy for wanting to see this now that it's out there in the world? Certainly, the black belt version of Demetrius Johnson would be far more dangerous than the brown belt version that we saw all those years.
Yeah, he was inventing new submissions as a brown belt. Can you even imagine what black belt Demetrius Johnson would be capable of?
Just taps you out with a sturdy glare.
Now, I was a little bit surprised to hear his response where he was just like, there is no number, that, he understands like the call out, all of that kind of stuff, but he felt like here his quote to Ariel Helwani, I'm black and white. It's either I'm in or I'm out. And when I say my black ass is retired, I don't sell false dreams. I don't sell wolf tickets. I don't sell none of that bullshit. My black ass is not coming back. Which, honestly, I respect the hell out of that position because it is so rare.
Yeah. It's something we almost hear from a professional fighter, almost never hear from a professional fighter. Demetrius Johnson has always been a guy who kind of walked to his own beat, let's say. And in a lot of ways, I think a very honest and real beat. He always felt like what you saw was what you got from Demetrius Johnson. And this, you can't help but respect this so much, right? Him saying he turned down $2 million, I believe he said at one point, where he was like, they offered me $2 million and I was just like, nah, I'm out, which is good for Demetrius Johnson standing on his principles, man. Although, would I watch DJ fight Alexander Pantoja? You're goddamn right I would.
Hell yeah, you would. And the thing is, too, I couldn't help but think immediately of that comment he made about laying in bed, doing the math on what he was paid for his title fights, especially after some of this antitrust lawsuit stuff was going on, and staring up at the ceiling and thinking about how badly he got screwed financially. And now here's a situation where they might be willing to pony up some serious dough to get you back in there for one more fight, one last go round with Alexander Pantoja. And you're just going, nope, not even going to consider it. Now, it's possible. I'm going to at least dangle the possibility, Chad, that this is master strategist Demetrius Johnson understanding Dana White after all these years. That him being like, the way to make Dana White adamant about making a fight, what would make him adamant about making two teammates fight each other is if they said they would never do it. That's when he decides that is the fight that absolutely must happen. How do you get him to have a show at the Sphere? You tell him you don't think he can do it. maybe Demetrius Johnson is just like, I'll say this. I'll just go out there and I'll be like, there's no amount of money possible that could get me to come out there. And prove me wrong, Dana. Prove me wrong. Come up to my house with that Brinks truck, swing the door open and see if I change my mind. I still don't really believe that that's actually what's going on. I believe Demetrius Johnson when he says this. And here's his quote. There is no number. That's the beautiful thing about it, right? When I look at my position, a lot of people in mixed martial arts, they let the sport retire them. You look at the long list of athletes who've been in mixed martial arts, not just in the UFC. You look at Pride, you look at Bellator, you look at all the landscape of everything. Look at Fedor Emelianenko. He didn't have to do those last fights in his career, but maybe he still loved it. I think for me, in my position when I retired, I was like, I don't miss it. I'm not having fun anymore. So I am inclined to believe that about Demetrius Johnson and honestly respect it because I think there's a lot of people who might still find themselves in that position of feeling like, I'm not having fun anymore. I don't like it. But somebody says, you want one last big payday to help slide you into a more comfy retirement? And they would go, well, I guess I could do one more. But we've also seen people just basically just one more themselves into some sad, sad places in this sport.
This is Demetrius Johnson's tweet. It says, guys, I got offered $2 million to fight, exclamation point. I turned it down. I don't care to fight anymore. YouTube video dropping soon. Blushing cheeks, smiling emoji.
Oh, blushing cheeks, smiling emoji. Thanks for describing that part.
29,000.3 likes. So a lot of people backing Demetrius Johnson up on his decision to not take that $2 million. Next question this week comes to us from Matt Webb, who writes, do Ho Choi just absolutely dominated Nate the Trade and Landwehr by wrestling? This version of Do Ho Choi looks so much more adept and much more well-rounded. His wrestling and grappling and boxing looks so crisp and technical. Super impressive. Could this version of the Korean Superboy, parenthetically man, be a player at featherweight? First things first, do you think we need to promote Do Ho Choi from Korean Superboy to Korean Superman?
I mean, that is what we were arguing in favor of with Stephen Wonderman Thompson, right?
Yeah, with the Wonder Man,
he's like 40.
Yeah, with the Wonder Man, it was more age-based, right? Just a gentleman of a certain age cannot be out here in good faith passing himself off as the Wonder Boy. Do Ho Choi is 33, which obviously, legally speaking, is too old to be a boy. But he's still got that youthful appearance, though.
He does, but he's also, this is a guy who has fought in the UFC and served in the Korean military.
Okay.
They don't make boys like that, Chad.
No, that's pretty manly. That's pretty manly.
Also, I would say in response to Matt Webb's question, yeah, he did go out there and dominate Nate the Train and finish him basically with wrestling, but he was piecing him up with striking. And honestly, like that's the part that, like, I was impressed with how well-rounded he was when he needed to be, and also how he was able to adapt as the fight sort of changed as it moved on, where he was just like, oh, okay, so there's an opportunity. The guy's trying to make it into a little bit of a brawl, which honestly was the only moments of success Nate Landwehr even came close to having in that fight, was when he was trying to make it a little messier, trying to make it the kind of fight that we expected it to be, honestly, with guys planting their feet, swanging and banging. And Do Ho Choi was like, nah, we're not playing that shit, because why give this guy a chance? And
you know
took
what's
him down.
bad? You know what's bad is when you go back to your corner after round one and your cornermen are like, pretty sure he's slowing down. That's a bad sign.
He was beating your ass so much, there's no way he can keep that up all night.
That's the most positive thing your corner can think to say to you. Is like, he's got to be getting tired, what with the ass whipping he's putting on you. Not good, man.
Striking wise, in that first round, he looked sharp as hell, man. He looked so good. He looked so fast. He was just like no wasted movement in this. He wasn't just reaching into his back pocket and throwing haymakers the way we had seen him do in the past. Everything he was doing was crisp, and he was hurting Nate Land. Like the first, I don't know, 60, 90 seconds it seemed like Nate Landwehr was just a punching bag for him. He was just coming up with his hands up high, and Ho Choi was just finding openings in there, doing nothing but landing strikes, not absorbing any. And it seemed like, man, Nate Landwehr he's not even in so much as a fight so much as he's just getting his ass whipped. And so like I was impressed with him all the way around. And then I didn't know that he had as good a groundwork as he did and as good like ground control. When's the last time we saw somebody finished via strikes from the crucifix position? Feels like it's been a while.
This is a tough one for me to watch, right?
Yeah. Oh, but it's a tough one for all of us.
A tough one for me to talk about. I'm a big fan of the train. I don't like to see Nate Landwehr have this happen to him. And you are right. As I was watching this myself, I had to admit to myself, this is a little embarrassing to see a guy get stopped from the crucifix position in the year of our Lord 2025.
Right. But honestly, it's not like he gave up.
No, like shit, man. The train ain't never given up. Whip his ass and see what happens. Yeah. Sometimes you just whip his ass from start to finish. The other time, if he doesn't lose, he probably wins.
You could hear him like grunting with effort and frustration as he's trying to get out of there. He never gave up. He never just sort of like accepted that, but he couldn't really do much about it. And Ho Choi had put it on him from start to finish. And honestly, I came away from that being like, we were thinking about Ho Choi as just sort of a good time guy, as a fun fighter to have in the division. Now do you have to start thinking about this guy as a legit threat in the division?
Yeah, and unexpected from a guy who not too long ago was coming in off 3 straight losses, right? That was back in the teens. His last fight against Charles Jourdain, he lost in December of 2019 for the 3-fight losing streak. Comes back, has the draw with Kyle Nelson in February of last year. Now he's won 2 in a row, one over Bill Algeo and now over Nate Landwehr. Just a huge career turnaround for the Korean Superboy. And you might say that time he spent away from the cage, maybe he improved.
Maybe
he improved during that time. Next question this week comes to us from Dan Alexander, who writes in to say, why was Anthony Smith allowed to fight Dominic Reyes? This not only felt sad, but smelt sad. If you want to know where Dan Alexander is emailing us from, that's smelt with a T, and felt negligent on the UFC's part. What are we doing here? This was bad. You can't call the fight off by the time a guy is in the Harley Davidson prep point or whatever you want to call it. But Smith was over there kind of like openly weeping from the emotions of having lost his friend and longtime coach leading up to this fight. So that was a tough one. And then you got Dominic Reyes coming out afterwards saying that Anthony Smith told him, just punch me because I want to feel something, while they were in the cage together. And that all around makes this seem like a pretty bad scene.
Yeah. I mean, as for the question of why was he allowed to fight him, if you say you want to get in there and do it, the UFC will put you in there and give you a chance to do it. That part, it's so hard to imagine the UFC stepping in and being like, we think you're too sad right now. We think that there's too heavy a weight on your heart, so we're not going to allow this fight to go forward. Like you can never imagine them doing that. And if Anthony Smith thinks he wants to do it, and we've seen people, especially, you take fighters where that is the thing they know that's been a constant in their life for so many years, and they run into something difficult in their personal lives. It's very easy for them to decide that the solution to this problem yet again is fighting. Yeah. That is going to be the answer for everything I face. And especially if I can focus on this fight, then maybe I don't have to focus on this other stuff that is going on in my life. But this one, clearly you could tell it was affecting him. Like, he was toward the end of that first round, just like, hands down, please do go ahead and punch me. Yeah. And it does make me wonder. First of all, we got the comment from Dana White afterwards where he was there asking And I'm like, what do you think about Chris Weidman? What do you think about Anthony Smith? What do you think about Clay Guida? And he was like, retire. They should all retire tonight. But then the question was like, does that mean you're going to release them from their contracts? Like, because if you're, or like, are you going to offer them another fight? Because it's easy for Dana White to sit up there and be like, they should retire. They should stop this thing. But you are not going to give them the option to, if they, like, you're basically saying UFC doesn't see any future use for you, but I'm not going to make it easy for you to go see if somebody else has a future use for you. And that's always a tricky thing, because it's like, if you think the dude can't fight anymore, let him out of his contract. If he wants to go find out if that's true elsewhere, that's his business. But Dana White too often wants to have that sort of power to tell people that they should retire, when, you know, a lot of these guys, this is what they have. This is the thing that they have.
Here is Dominic Reyes' quote. He says, Anthony is a true warrior and he's going to fight to the end. He wanted to fight to the end. He needed to feel something tonight. So when I went in the cage, I haven't been around Anthony much in my life, but when I was in the cage with him, he was emotional, right? That's a dangerous man. He's fighting for a friend. He doesn't care about the outcome. He just wants to feel something. There was a point in the first round when he put his hands down and was just like, punch me in the face. And I obliged. That's my job. So perhaps Anthony Smith didn't say he needed to feel something, but as you said, he invited Dominic Reyes to punch him in the face in a defenseless manner.
Yeah. It does make me wonder, like, when he was asked afterwards, is this your last fight? And he said, probably, which, as we've talked about before, sometimes that feels like that's as good as you can get. From, they say like, absolutely, I'm done, like right after a loss. You never know how seriously to take that in that exact moment. But when they say, probably, that's it. Like, okay, I can believe that. I can accept it. If any fighter says they're always just 90% done, that's good enough. That's believable. But it also made me wonder if he will go back and then be like, well, I was too emotional in that fight. I was in no space mentally to fight. And so I did not offer a good accounting of myself. And I don't want that to be the last one. Like, I could see that factoring into the decision as well. But then, like he said, he does have to face the question of, if you do want to try to do this again, you got to do it again without your friend. And that's got to be heavy too.
Yeah. We did get a question from Sir Nigel's estranged cousin, Sir Berenston Longstock, and all he said was Ian Gary is a lot, which, yeah, that is also true. We got this one from @PissedOffLawyer, who said, here's the big question coming out of UFC 310. In arguing against the mandatory use of seatbelts, is Bryce Mitchell expressing a sincerely held belief or angling for a position in the Trump administration as the chair of the National Transportation Safety Board? You know, obviously, Bryce Mitchell says a lot of dumb shit. And I wish he didn't, for a lot of reasons. But one of those reasons is that the only listener mail that we got about Bryce Mitchell this week was about him saying the thing about seatbelts, when in fact he went out there and dominated the shit out of Crone Gracie, aside from almost getting armbarred at one point, and then finished him with the nasty ass slam and some of the hardest elbows that you will ever see. Just automatically shut his lights off. And here we are in the days following the event, just talking about how Bryce Mitchell said some more dumbass shit.
I will point out, we had a conversation before this fight trying to guess what dumbass shit Bryce Mitchell would say, and we weren't even close. That gives you a sense of the breadth of this man's dumbass shitness. He can just range all over the place.
Yeah.
In terms of his dumbass shit topics. You can't ever predict what's coming from this guy. Also, though, let me ask you this question. What does it mean to beat Crone Gracie in the year 2024?
He didn't look like a UFC fighter out there.
No, he did not.
No, that was my conclusion while watching this thing, is that he just didn't look like he belongs in the cage out there with Bryce Mitchell, or, you know, with any top level, well-rounded MMA fighter in 2025. And that's kind of a shame in a lot of ways. And especially for for Bryce Mitchell, he's a guy who needed a win, right? Coming off getting knocked out so bad by Josh Emmett last December. So it was good to get him back in the win column, I guess. But yeah, it's I'm not gonna say it's hard to watch Kron Gracie, but he doesn't look like he belongs out there with these guys.
What was his plan?
Pull guard,
what?
and then sit there. You know what he was doing? He was fighting like it was an actual Gracie challenge fight, right?
Yes.
On the green mats in the basement of the Gracie Baja Jiu-Jitsu studio. Pull guard on Jason DeLucia, and then you sit there until he makes a mistake, and you tap him out because there's no time limits.
Right, and that shit works a whole lot better when the other person doesn't know jiu-jitsu. Does not work that well when they also know jiu-jitsu. It's not 1996, man. People know jiu-jitsu. People who are getting in there in the UFC cage, they've seen this shit before. Especially Bryce Mitchell. He has definitely seen this shit before. I don't know how you thought you're going to win that way. And it just made me wonder again, why did he take this fight? Why is it just because he has fights on his contract? Might as well go ahead and do them. I don't understand. Is it if you're going to be a Gracie walking around with a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu gym in the state of Montana, by the way. I did a guy who, a famous dude from a famous family who owns a jiu-jitsu gym in Montana, fights in the UFC. I'm going to get some texts from some friends in the Montana jiu-jitsu scene as this thing is happening, before, during, and after this fight. Now, I have not personally been to Kron Gracie's gym out there. Is it in Bozeman or is it?
I want to say it's in Belgrade, but that might as well be Bozeman.
Yeah. I haven't been to his gym, but I heard from people who had, and the sentiment seemed to be that the guy they encountered there seemed arrogant and not especially interested in expanding what he already has in terms of a skill set. And that's not a good recipe for hanging with these dudes in today. If that's where you are, stay home and teach jiu-jitsu. Don't get in there because bad shit's going to happen to you by a guy who doesn't believe in fucking seatbelts. His reasoning, you hear his reasoning about why he doesn't believe in seatbelts? Because you might need to roll out of the car, Chad.
I mean, that says something, right? That's a commentary on maybe how Bryce Mitchell drives. Or
I'll tell you what it says is that Bryce Mitchell thinks that he is a character in like a 90s action film.
Duke's a hazard.
Yeah, he thinks, well, hey, a likely scenario is that the car's about to fall off a cliff and I got to throw myself off the other way, save my life, and I'll be really glad I don't have that seatbelt then. When really, the likely scenario is that you get into some kind of collision and you just go flying through the damn windshield. That's a whole lot likelier. Like, he's out here thinking that the big issue he's going to confront in his life is having to jump and hang on to the bottom landing part of a helicopter as it takes off, when really it's heart disease or something, like that's kind of where he's at. That's where he thinks he's at anyway.
I would like to see some statistics, maybe from the transportation department, about which is more likely, whether or not you get in an accident where a seatbelt saves your life or you drive off a cliff. But I'll bet you this, whatever the statistics are, I bet the likelihood you drive off a cliff increases like 15% if you are Bryce Mitchell.
I bet whatever the statistics are, the likelihood that you convince Bryce Mitchell of anything he doesn't already believe is basically zero. That's the thing. It's incredible to see a guy that dumb and that confident that he knows it all. So dumb, he can't believe that there's even, he can't even conceive of the idea of experts in certain fields. He just can't get through his head.
That's going to do it for listener mail this week. If you have a question, comment, or concern that you want to air to the podcast in future weeks, you know how to do it. Go to the website, comainevent.com, and click the link in the top right-hand corner of the screen that says email the podcast. That'll get you in touch with us. Right now, though, we're going to get started talking a little bit about Pantoja versus Asakura. Well, Ben, you were talking about Bilal Muhammad showing up in his hoodie. A guy who showed up wanting people to remember him last week during the pre-fight events was Kai Asakura. Here is a guy who did show up wearing the tailored suit, showed up with the bleach blonde hair, showed up wearing sunglasses. You might say he was styling and profiling. Nation a little bit was Kai Asakura. And he kind of fought like it too, man. This was a fast and furious men's flyweight title fight. Asakura right out the gate threw a huge flying knee that it looked like he actually partially landed on Pantoja. Unfortunately, that kind of turned out to be the pinnacle of what Asakura was able to do here against Pantoja, who himself was letting it all hang out in all facets. But I'm not sure that is that negative a commentary on Kai Asakura as it is like a huge positive commentary on Pantoja, who just seems like, yes, at this point in his career, he is in fact that dominant.
You know, it's kind of nice that Kai Asakura was, as advertised, a guy willing to go out there and let it all hang out. Because you could easily see a situation where a guy comes in first fight in the UFC, fighting for a title, and maybe fights a little bit conservative because he knows that Pantoja is a guy who can seize on some mistakes. And he didn't do that. He went out there guns blazing right away. And he did land a couple shots.
Yeah.
We were wondering, how will Pantoja stand up to the power of a guy who's fought so much at bantamweight? And fine, it turns out. Like he ate a couple and never seemed bothered by it. And also, as advertised, is Pantoja, who has an ability, like even when you are starting to gain some momentum, to just shut you down.
Yeah.
And that's what he did here. And honestly, I came away from this just sort of being like, you're going to have to get the pen out and keep signing guys for Pantoja, whether it's Muhammad Mukayev, bring him back, somebody else, because Pantoja's just run through so many people already in this division and seems like he's kind of only getting better.
The finishing sequence in this thing was crazy, right? The hops on the back and then has the body triangle locked in, just slick as shit while they're rolling over. And then the actual techniques that he used to sink the choke were off the charts also. So that was just the entire fight was impressive for Pantoja, but that finishing sequence was amazing, I thought. You know what? And Kai Asakura had to get choked unconscious also, which I think kind of fits in with the rest of the Kai Asakura gimmick that we were treated to during this fight. And frankly, he seems like a guy that UFC fans will want to see again, despite the fact that he lost to the champion in his debut. Still seems like he has a viable future in this company. You could do worse if you were Alexander Pantoja than to have, as your gimmick, they got to keep signing new guys for me to beat. The Alexander Pantoja versus the world kind of a situation.
Do you remember when we were trying to find a way to get people more invested in what Demetrius Johnson was doing in his reign of dominance over the flyweight division? And we suggested that he go door to door with a bathroom scale. And anybody who was 125 pounds, he would offer to fight them on the front lawn. Like that seems like maybe we're getting to that kind of territory with Alexander Pantoja. Because honestly, if you were to ask me, how do you put together a game plan to beat this guy? I'd be like, well, step one is that you can't really have any weaknesses because he'll find them. Like, you got to be so good everywhere. And even that only gets you to even, basically. That does not get you to where you are beating him in one area. It just makes it so that you make it hard for him to seize on one area in which he could beat you. So I don't know, man. It has been such a problem for the UFC over the years, just trying to get people invested. And yet it feels like sport-wide, we've been inching closer, right? Because before, there was a time when they thought, like, there's no future at 155 because it's just too small. And then 155 became one of the best divisions in the sport. And then 145, with help from Conor McGregor and Jose Aldo, that whole rivalry, became a big time division in the sport. We thought, but then 135, Sean O'Malley comes along, lights a fire under some people, stuff like that. We're tiptoeing up to it. Are we just waiting for the right personality? Because it doesn't seem like the lesson of the Demetrius Johnson era was basically that you can't just win enough fights to win people over. That takes something else.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's not like Demetrius Johnson was completely personality free, right? Like
True.
Demetrius Johnson is actually an engaging, smart, dynamic, charismatic guy. If you actually take the time to listen to him talk, or to talk to him, or watch his videos or whatever. We also have had Henry Cejudo in that division, world class athlete. Also a guy
who, when he said he was walking away, they said, "Okay, bye."
Yeah. Like that gif from Tombstone,
Yes.
right? And he's not a guy who's short on personality, for better or for worse. You know what I mean? Give Henry Cejudo credit. He was out here trying, right? He was out here trying to give us something. We had Brandon Moreno, beloved fighter, who also has sort of a lovable personality. Shoot, you could go so far as to say you could do something with Davison Figueiredo had you wanted to. So I don't know if Alexander Pantoja is the guy who's going to come along and suddenly put the division on the map, so to speak, in terms of marketability. But like I said, you could do worse than to give the guy a gimmick, have him be like the Terminator who destroys all these guys. That he's beat so many guys that you got to get on the horn and bring new people in to have Pantoja fight him in their UFC debut. Maybe that would be something you could do, just because he has beat so many of the other top contenders. Brandon Royval, bless his heart, things have gotten so bad in terms of the talent pool that Pantoja has not yet defeated, that they had to cut to Brandon Royval in the crowd, standing there looking like he was talking shit, kind of being like, I'm not impressed by this. I'm not impressed by this performance. It's like, dude, you already lost twice to this man. Like, you think you can stand out there and act like you're not impressed by Pantoja? I don't know, man. It rings a little hollow to me at this point.
Maybe could he do the weird Jamal Hill yawn thing with his hand wide open?
Cover
like
his
he's
own
shoving
face.
popcorn in his mouth. Yeah.
Cover his own face like the thing from Alien. Trying to put an alien baby inside Jamal Hill. What we didn't talk about was Ciryl Gane and Alexander Volkov. Volkov coming out here looking like huge Patty Pimblett, looking like Patty Pimblett's big brother, trying to fight Ciryl Gane. What'd you think of Ciryl Gane coming out here? And if I can paraphrase Nate Diaz, you a wrestler now, shooting doubles and whatnot.
Well, I mean, if we were going to give Ciryl Gane some advice after that Francis Ngannou fight, wouldn't it have been to go get a singlet? And
that may have literally been the advice that we gave him.
So maybe he took it a step too far or whatever. I don't know. Like, it didn't seem like it seemed like something that he could potentially make work. I also think Alexander Volkov has gotten better since.
Who had Alexander Volkov top level heavyweight contender on their bingo card? Not me.
I tell you, what I did have on my $20 we never want to see again pick, I had myself a 2-fight parlay with Ciryl Gane and Shavkat Rakhmonov. Now that cashed. I don't feel great about it. I'm going to take the money because I need it. I need some wins in this competition. But I, even as a guy who had Gane picked, saw that one and I went, I don't know, man. I don't know if you really won that one. Like, when the decision is announced and you are announced as the winner and you turn and walk out of the cage immediately, that tells us something. You didn't feel triumphant in that moment.
I kind of admire, though, the way they make you come back and talk to Joe Rogan. They're like, no, you're not getting out of here without talking to Joe Rogan. We flew Rogan in. He's standing in the cage, ready to talk to you. Get your butt back in there and spend 3 minutes talking to Joe Rogan.
I'll tell you what, though, between Gane being gifted a decision and my Chiesa via sub, your boy was in the black this week. We'll talk about that later on Friday.
Oh, that's funny. I lost them all. No, I think I actually won one bet. But it was not enough to get me back to zero. So there's that. Uh um what was I gonna say? Toe X-ray. Another toe X-ray on
Jesus
the
Christ.
map in mixed martial arts. Ciryl Gane comes out here after his win, saying, I broke my toe. Look at my toes. I will say this. The Ciryl Gane broken toe X-ray still beats the shit out of the Conor McGregor broken toe X-ray. Ciryl Gane didn't have to draw an arrow on
Nope.
his X-ray to show you what the broken toe was. That toe was smashed into a million pieces.
We could see it. Yeah. Before we get out of here, I did want to mention, remember when we were talking about Aljamain Sterling being mad about being on the prelims and he's going to show us that he's a main card fighter and all that kind of stuff? I got to say, they did it. They proved that was one of the best fights of the night. Um, Interesting to me when we look, because one of the conversations we were having with Aljamain Sterling talking beforehand, and we were like, does Aljamain Sterling feel like the UFC is just constantly fucking with him, that Dana White just doesn't like him, and that's why he's so willing to read into his card placement here, and that maybe he has a basis for doing that. Then you come out of this event, you get 4 performance of the night bonuses: Pantoja, Vicente Luque, Chase Hooper, Kennedy Nzechukwu. No fight of the night bonus awarded.
Huh.
Movsar Evloev and Aljamain Sterling, to my mind, had themselves the fight of the night. This was a good ass fight, man.
It
It was a
was back
really
and forth, yeah.
fun, exciting grappling exchange, high level shit between these two guys. Could have gone either way. And the UFC just chose to look instead at the spike card and be like, nope, there's no fight of the night here. So if I'm Aljamain Sterling, I'm looking at him and being like, I told you guys. I told you both that I was going to prove that I deserve to be on the main card. He, doesn't go his way, but it's still a great ass fight. And told you guys that the UFC just is fucking with me. Dana White doesn't like me. There it is.
I mean, yeah, there's some evidence to suggest that might be right. We got a question from Mike Garcia kind of about Dana White showing up to the press conference just being grumpy, talking about how it was dumb question night or whatever it is that he said. Like, that's it's just, as the man ages, it seems like he's getting grumpier and grumpier out here.
Let us spare a moment to discuss how Kevin Iole was the guy at the press conference who asked him, do you have any comment on Conor McGregor's civil trial verdict? And Dana White first acts like he is surprised anybody would even expect him to have a comment. Like, what do you mean, a comment? like he didn't think walking into this room in a million years anybody would ever think he might have some thoughts on the biggest star in the history of their company. The guy who, anytime he shows up to fight, brings them the biggest single night pay-per-view they're going to do that year pretty much every time, being found liable for rape in his home country. Just months after the UFC had him scheduled to fight, and months before the UFC probably wants to schedule him to fight in 2025. And he is surprised that anybody would think he should have a comment on that. Man, the video game people had a comment on it. The liquor he had his name on had a comment on it. The Wax Museum didn't want to do business with Conor McGregor anymore. And the UFC president, the guy who is responsible for employing him at the main thing he does, is like, why would you think I would have anything at all to say about it, positively or negatively? Chad, we haven't done one of these in a while, but are you fucking kidding me?
I'm kidding me. Not only did he act surprised, he acted like the person asking him was being a dick.
Yeah, like what? Of course, you should have some kind of comment, man. You probably should have had a statement to put out at the time when everybody from the video game to the Wax Museum were running away from this guy. And you guys are just like, we don't see anything that bears mentioning here at all. Like, we all see you. We see what this is. And yet to act just like, oh, why would you think I'd have a comment? Man, as somebody pointed out on Twitter right afterwards, if Francis Ngannou got a parking ticket, you'd have something to say about it. You were just up there telling us how he's not a good guy. That's apparently important to you. And then the biggest star you've ever had gets found liable for rape, and you got nothing to say and can't believe anybody would think that you might have something to say. You got something to say about everything. Not this, though.
That's going to do it. Fucking kidding me? That's going to do it this week for the Co-Main Event podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We're over on the Patreon page all week. Jump in, get that 50% off deal. 20E as in Echo 37 is the code to use at checkout to get that deal. If you do, we'll see you tomorrow for the live chat. If not, we'll see you right back here next week. As for right now, thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate the support. We are done. We are through. We are out. When the liquor people and the wax museum are out in front of you, PR-wise, that's a kind of a sad commentary. And it's not like the UFC doesn't have good, professional, smart, capable PR people, because we know that they do. 10 out of 10 chance somebody over in the UFC was kind of like, should we have a statement? Should we have something to say? Should we put something out? Nothing. Silence. Then when you get asked about it, you're going to act like it's out of line that you might have to answer questions about Conor McGregor.
Well, I mean, you can't hope to compete with the high ethical standards of the Wax Museum.
Their flax are good.
Yeah.
You do PR for the Wax Museum, you're a pro. You're a fucking pro.
Be on your P's and motherfucking Q's.